So this movie was interesting to say the least. What's going on YouTube? I'm Don. Today is May 24th and I had a chance to check out the movie Men yesterday in theaters. And so this movie was rated 75% by Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb gave it a 6.4. So those are pretty good ratings. This movie was directed by Alex Garland. The only other movie that I'm familiar with of his is a movie called Ex Machina. It's kind of like a sci-fi futuristic type movie, and it was actually pretty good. So the stars of this movie are Jessie Buckley, who plays Harper, and this is my first time seeing her, and also Rory Kinnear, who plays Jeffrey. So he plays actually a lot of people throughout the movie. He plays all the men in the movie. When the movie kicks off, we see a man falling from an apartment complex. And we later learn that this man is the husband of Harper, our main character. His name is James, and we also later learn that he committed suicide. James and Harper were having some problems in their relationship. Upon telling James that she wants a divorce, he threatens to commit suicide and eventually does. They actually show in the movie some scenes of his body, and we kind of see some of his particular injuries, which will be important later on towards the end of the movie. After this traumatic event, Harper decides to take a 2-week getaway, kind of clear her mind of everything that's happened. And something interesting that happens when she first gets to her getaway spot. There's a tree in the front yard, an apple tree, and she actually takes one of the apples from the tree and takes a bite from it. This kind of is similar to Eve taking the forbidden fruit in the Bible, and actually the guy that she's renting from, Jeffrey, makes a reference to this, saying that's forbidden fruit, we don't eat from there. When she gets to the house, it's a little eerie. Jeffrey is a little off-putting, I would say, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Things kind of wrap up when she decides to go for a walk one day, and she sees a naked man in the woods. This frightens her. She runs back to the house, and she kind of decompresses, doesn't really think too much more of it. The next day, she sees that the man has stalked her to her house. So she calls the police, and they arrest the man. So something that really sticks out in this scene is Jeffrey, the person she's renting from, the policeman, and the naked man all have the same face. And Harper doesn't seem to notice, and I found that strange. So the next scene that kind of drew some interest was when she went to the church to pray. And when she arrives at the church, we see a little boy, and he wants her to play with him, and she tells him no, and the little boy curses her and runs off. And then we also see a priest. So this priest and this little boy also share the same face as the first three men: the naked man, the policeman, and her renter. So at this point, it's definitely as if Harper is not even acknowledging that everyone that she's seeing in the town has the same face. So she actually has a talk with the priest, and she kind of confides in him and tells him that the reason she's here is because her husband recently committed suicide and it may be her fault. So the priest is actually very understanding of the situation at first, and immediately after he asks her, do you think if you would have handled things differently that your husband wouldn't have committed suicide? This really upsets Harper. I feel like she thought she found someone that she could confide in the priest, and he ended up just adding to her guilt. To me, this was one of the first moments in the movie you can kind of see some foreshadowing. So she storms off, she storms back to her cottage or loft or whatever you want to call it. She's actually talked to her friend a couple of times. Her friend is played by Gail Rankin, who is, her name is Riley in the movie. And she's telling her friends all these weird events that are going on. And her friend at first was trying to convince her to come home. But after second thought, she actually wants her to stay, and she has the idea to come up there for the duration. Harper decides that she wants to visit the pub that's in town. Just like the priest, just like the naked man, everybody in the pub has the same face. So you have Jeffrey, you have the policeman, you have the bartender, and you also have two other customers in the pub, all with the same face. And she actually gets news from the policeman that they released the naked man because there was nothing to charge him with. Of course, this incites Harper even more. She's even more angry. She heads back to her place, and this is when things really start to ramp up. We see the naked man is back again, and actually all forms of the men show up to the house. Harper did show fear, and of course, people that you don't know, you're in a strange place. That's definitely a situation to be scared of. But I never got the sense that any of the men were wanting to be harmful towards her more than be. It seemed like to me they just wanted to terrorize her. So there's this scene in the movie where she's kind of battling all these different reimaginations of this same being or same man. She actually takes a knife and cuts one of the men, and when she does this, she splits his hand open, and every time we see the man in a different form, he has that same injury, that split hand. Another injury that occurs is when Jeffrey steals her car. He wrecks the car and he breaks his leg. The conclusion to this movie was definitely wow. I didn't see it coming, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the director was trying to get at. Basically what happens is the naked man starts to give birth to all of the different forms of himself in the village. And I mean like physically giving birth. It was a man giving birth. And each form, once he regurgitated one form, that form regurgitated the next form. So that was kind of freaky. The last form that appeared was her husband James. And just how I said his injuries would be important, the same injuries he suffered when he fell out of the window to his death were the same injuries that were inflicted upon the men in the village that Harper were dealing with. And she actually inflicted one of the injuries directly with the hand. Once James appeared, it was clear to me that this all was a manifestation of Harper's guilt, that James had committed suicide, and it possibly was her fault, and she possibly could have done something to stop it. She actually asked James, why did you do this? And he says something to the effect of, because I've always wanted your love. Don't quote me. That kind of summed up the movie, and it just let me know that the whole movie was pretty much a metaphor for Harper's guilt and how she felt about James committing suicide after their separation. So the closing scene of the movie, Riley finally arrives. This part has kind of been up for debate. I'm under the impression that none of those things really happened. It was a figment of Harper's imagination, and it was a manifestation of her guilt. But others believe that the events really did take place, because when Riley arrives, the car is wrecked. We see blood on the concrete, and there's blood on Harper's clothes. I guess that's pretty much up for your interpretation and what the director was going for. The closing scene, we see Harper sitting outside. It's morning time. She has blood on her clothes, and she's smiling. And to me, what kind of summed it up is she'll always feel that guilt for James' death. And I think all of the things that we were able to see physically, the car, the blood, is just a representation of the chaos that'll forever be in her mind. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that last scene. But it was definitely an interesting movie. I would say it's a solid movie. It's a solid watch. So if I had to rate this movie, I think I would give it 6 stars out of 10. It definitely had a message. Definitely a lot of folk elements, a lot of horror elements, and I think the script was pretty solid. So that is my take on Men. Alright, YouTube, that was the video. Thanks for watching. If you do go check out the movie, make sure you let me know what you think about it in the comment section. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And yeah, that's it. Until next time. Peace.
Wow.